Here's part one of my interview with Israeli Prime Minister just hours ago, Benjamin Netanyahu. And joining us now is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Prime Minister, great to have you back. I've known you. We've been friends for decades. And I just want to express at the top of this interview my deepest sympathy for all that you and your fellow countrymen are going through. I remember you stood strong and steadfast with America after 9/11 and had a lot of moral clarity when others did not. And I'm grateful for that. And I think it's now time for America to do the same for you. But my deepest sympathies for what you're dealing with.
Well, thank you, Sean. And thank the American people across the board, the American government, the Congress, the Senate, the president. Everybody has been very, very strong for Israel because they understand that our fight is your fight and our victory is your victory. And there is no substitute for victory. We have to have the forces of civilization beat these barbarians because otherwise this barbarism will spread and will endanger the entire world. Every American, every civilized country would be under peril. We have to win. There is no substitute for victory. Total victory.
I hear you say that. It reminds me of Winston Churchill in World War II. What is our aim? Our aim, I could say in one word, victory. Then he spoke at length, victory against a monstrous tyranny. And this group, Hamas, is only one of your enemies, and they have in their very charter the destruction of your country. You actually used the phrase, if I could read it to you, if you want peace, you have to destroy Hamas. I agree with you, but that's Hamas in the south. Rockets are being fired into your country from the north out of Lebanon. You have the Houthi rebels that have declared war against you out of Yemen. You have Syria firing missiles at you. Then you have the head of the snake, Iran, orchestrating all of these proxy conflicts. So I ask you this question. If we're going to define what victory looks like, doesn't that have to be Gaza could no longer be a launching pad for rockets being fired into your country? Lebanon could no longer be a launching area for rockets being fired into your country? Doesn't that mean the network of terror tunnels, and I've been in some of them, as you know, that all those terror tunnels have to be destroyed? Doesn't it also mean on some level that Iran has to be dealt with for total victory?
Well, if you connect the dots, you see that there's an axis of terror here against an alliance for peace. The axis of terror is controlled by Iran, run by Iran, financed by Iran. Iran, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, and their other minions. They want to bring the Middle East, the world, back to the dark ages, early Middle Ages. That's what they are about. And on the other side stands Israel, the moderate Arab states, of course, the United States, all the forces that want to see peace, prosperity for the Middle East and for the world. And that's the battle that is being waged right now. It's being waged right now, most importantly and most decisively in Hamas, one of the extensions of this axis of terror. And everybody's waiting to see who's going to win. Is Israel going to win or Hamas going to win? But it's not merely Israel's victory. It's our victory over the axis, because when they see that we defeated them in one place, we'll defeat them in every place, because that's how power works. They want to see who's winning. We have to win, not only for our sake, for the sake of the Middle East, for the sake of our Arab neighbors. You know what? For the sake of Gazans who have been held by this dark tyranny that has brutalized them, brought them nothing but bloodshed and poverty and misery. So we have to win to protect Israel. We have to win to safeguard the Middle East. We have to win for the sake of the civilized world. That's the battle we're fighting, and it's being waged right now. There's no substitute for that victory. It'll affect the other theaters that you mentioned as well.
Over 28 communities in the north near the border with Lebanon have had to be evacuated. There's always been a concern about a two-front war. My concern is even larger than that, and that is that, you know, if rockets are being fired out of Syria or the Houthi rebels are firing rockets into Israel, that becomes an even bigger conflict. But I agree with your general point. You always said that radical Islamists view Israel as the little Satan, America as the big Satan. That's a phrase you've used often.
They've used it. They say America is the great Satan, and we're the small Satan. We're just a small Satan standing in their way to get at you, the great Satan, because they, you know what, all these radicals these terrorists, these monstrous regimes and organizations, they say there's no difference between Israel and the United States. You are them and they are you, because we represent these same values of freedom, respect for human life, respect for individual liberty. They have nothing of that. They don't care for their people. They don't care for liberty. They don't care for life. They glorify death. They glorify murder. Remember what happened here. I mean, what happened here was that Israel was attacked, unprovoked, by a sea of terrorists who stormed into our communities, murdered and raped women, burned children. I met a soldier today, an Arab soldier in the Israeli army, who said, the first thing I saw was the corpse of a woman beheaded. They behead women. They fired on youngsters celebrating a music festival. They put them in a death pit like in Babi Yar in the Holocaust, and fired machine guns into them, mowing them down. They took hostages. They took a 10-month-old baby hostage. What kind of monsters hold babies hostages? Holocaust survivors they took hostages. Men, women, children, elderly. These are monstrous terrorists. And they perpetrated the worst horrors against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And if we let them get away with it, this barbarism will spread. You know what the difference is, Sean? You know, at least the Nazis and Stalin, they wanted to hide their crimes. These people glorify their crimes. They bring GoPro cameras for their murders to show the entire world they celebrate it. So who's going to win? Are the good guys going to win, or the bad guys are going to win? And of course, we have to make sure that the forces of good, the forces of peace, the forces of progress and prosperity, they win, and not the forces that take us back to the dark ages. That's the battle, and it'll affect every single person, not only in the Middle East, but well beyond. Because if Israel is imperiled, if the Middle East goes down, Europe is next. It's like ISIS. You know, people thought it was a local thing. It wasn't. It was a global thing, and it affected Americans. It beheaded Americans. If we don't win now, then Europe is next, and you're next, and we have to win. We have to win. There is no substitute for total victory.
You mentioned the atrocities being chronicled, and they had GoPro cameras. The IDF has shown people in the media, and it's been described in great detail to me, and I have an appointment to see this as well. All of these human atrocities that you speak of are on videotape. You have some 40-plus minutes of tape available. I understand, and I've watched videos of beheadings. These are not images that one will ever be able to erase from their mind, and you wouldn't think that such evil exists in this world, but it does. And these tapes are available for the world to see. Would it be wise, perhaps, for the IDF to pixel out faces so that families are not having to deal with the trauma of seeing this, but let the world see the magnitude of evil that you are destroying? Yes, they rape women. Yes, they slaughtered babies and women and children. Yes, they beheaded babies. Yes, they burned babies, all of which, much of which has been chronicled. Would it be worthwhile for the world to fully, to have the moral clarity to understand the barbarism, the monstrous evil that we're talking about here? Because it's on videotape.
Yes, you're quite right. There's sensitivity of the families. We respect that, and we try to persuade them to do exactly what you said. And I think we're getting somewhere. We show it to selective leaders in America and elsewhere in the world, and people watch these tapes and they shudder. Some break out into tears because the inhumanity, the deliberate, not merely the deliberate murder of people, the deliberate murder, mutilation, the ripping off of body parts, the beheadings, they're so, it's accompanied with such fiendish glee, the joy of murder, the joy of terror, the joy of torture. It's just absolutely extraordinary. And this is the battle we're fighting. Now, it's a very difficult enemy to fight because it's committing a double war crime. Not only is it deliberately targeting civilians, our civilians, but it's deliberately hiding behind their civilians because they implant themselves in schools, in hospitals, in UN facilities, in civilian neighborhoods. That's where they put their rockets, that's where they put their command posts, and they seek immunity there. And of course, we can't give them that immunity. We try to do everything in our power to minimize civilian casualties. But one thing we don't want to do, everybody says the use of human shields, the use of civilians as a shield for terrorists, that's wrong, okay? But we have to make sure that it's not merely condemned. We have to make sure that it's ineffective. And if the blame is directed against Israel, against the victim that is returning fire with the most judicious use of military power that's possible in these circumstances, if blame is placed on Israel, that tactic becomes effective and will be used again and again and again. And we can't allow that. In fact, Hamas is saying they'll do it again and again and again. And that's why we have to win out, root them out completely, but also send a message to the axis of terror. You're not going to win. We're not going to let you do this. We defeated you here. We'll defeat you elsewhere. And we should have the entire civilized world line up behind Israel while it fights this battle of civilization. It's our common civilization against their common barbarism. Civilization must win. So Israel must destroy Hamas to have peace. If you want peace, destroy Hamas. If you want security, destroy Hamas. If you want to beat the axis of terror, destroy Hamas. This is what Israel must do. This is what Israel is doing. But it's not only doing it for ourselves, for our sake, it's doing it for your sake too, for our common future. For the future, a better future for the Israel, for the Palestinians, for the Middle East, for the world.
You know, when on one of my trips to Israel, and I've been there a number of times, and I've interviewed you while in Israel, but on one of the trips where there was a flare-up, that was when I went into one of the terror tunnels. I went, it's almost 100 feet underground. It's sophisticated, you know, almost architecture, and it was all supposed to be humanitarian aid for hospitals and schools and infrastructure. But I also stopped by a city, a border city that you know well, Sderot, and while there, you know, prior to my arrival, they had been hit with 10,000 rockets in 10 years. Their children cannot play outside. They play in bunker underground playgrounds in that city. And that's the same with many border cities. And I guess when we get to the real heart of this, doesn't all of this have to be rooted out? And for example, while the Iron Dome has been enormously successful and helpful and intercepted thousands of missiles, it can no longer be a launching pad. I go back to that part. But also, you talk about Hamas must be destroyed. What about Hezbollah? Do you believe a victory over Hamas sends a strong enough message that they stop firing missiles from Lebanon into Israel?
I think it's a necessary message. May not be sufficient, but it's definitely necessary, because without victory in the south, you're certainly not going to have deterrence in the north against Hezbollah, and we'll have to deal with that. But I think the first step is the first step, and the first step means Hamas did this. Hamas is going to pay for this, and it's going to pay for this by its total eradication. By the way, you talk about underground tunnels. I mean, they've got a network there of hundreds of kilometers, hundreds of miles of underground tunnels that are used as terror tunnels, as command posts, as command bunkers. And you know what? Their leader is like a little Hitler. He's sitting in the bunker, and he's saying, I don't care about what happens to the civilian population on top. One of the Hamas spokesmen said the other day, you know, the tunnels, the underground is for us, for this messianic, violent, theological cult that has to be destroyed. And he said, above ground, that's not our responsibility. Civilian population, that's Israel's responsibility in the UN. They don't care a hoot about their civilian population. The only one that tries to keep them out of harm's way is Israel. We create safe passages, corridors. We create a safe zone for them. And as we ask them to leave, guess who's trying to prevent them from leaving the zone of fighting? Hamas. It's not Israel that is firing in the safe corridor given to Palestinians. It's Hamas. It's not Israel who's trying to keep these people at gunpoint in the zone of fighting. It's Hamas. So we're dealing here with a brutal enemy that is committing a double war crime of targeting our civilians and hiding behind their civilians, forcibly keeping them in the zone of fighting. And I think all those people who are naive and are, who are either naive or misinformed or worse, who are condemning Israel, they really should be ashamed of themselves, because they're aligning themselves with pure, sheer evil. They should support the forces of civilization that are fighting this barbarism, because otherwise this barbarism will spread.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.